Welcome back everybody. In this video I want to tackle some reader comments left under this week's feature video, which was about the Bluesound NODE X network streamer, streaming DAC, network bridge, whatever you want to call it. And our first comment, I've got them here on my laptop, our first comment here comes from Lumpy966 and he writes, Fomo-Fi.
This episode is brought to you by AudioQuest, makers of the mythical series Analog Interconnects. Click the link in the show notes for more information.
I don't think it's actually that funny to say that something is Fomo-Fi. I'm making quite a serious point actually, that basically, well, FOMO means fear of missing out. And the music industry have known this for years, that if you make a limited edition version of something, you'll sell those pretty quickly. So I think Bluesound, who are owned by Lenbrook, have probably learned from making the C3050LE vintage styled amplifier from NAD, making that a limited edition, probably worked wonders for them in terms of sales because they sold their nearly 2,000 units out pretty damn quickly. And even though we don't know how many NODE X they're making, they're probably going to make a lot more because it will probably be a more popular product because it's more affordable, maybe, I'm guessing. Anyway, it's still only going to be a limited edition for this year. I've got no idea what's coming after it. We'll come back to that thought later in this video. And our second comment also comes from Lumpy966. He writes, if BlueOS would get Apple Music support, I'd be a happy boy. I think many of us would be happy boys and girls if BlueOS or any other kind of streaming platform got Apple Music support, that is natively inside their app. But I hate to burst your bubble, I don't think it's ever going to happen. I mean, never say never, but if we look to the next comment, actually, let me talk about the next comment and it'll point towards the answer to this train of thought. This comes from Rory Long 7826 and he writes, Sonos also talks to Apple Music and Plex, which nobody else does as far as I can see. The Plex thing, I don't know about that actually. I don't know whether a Sonos device can be a Plex endpoint. It's not the only thing now that can be a Plex endpoint because the FiiO R7 can now be a Plex amp endpoint, but I'll tackle that in the FiiO R7 review. But we're talking about Apple Music here and whether we can stream directly using the BlueOS app to a BlueOS device, the Apple Music streams. And I don't think it's ever going to happen. The only streaming hardware company that Rory Long has pointed out is Sonos, that has been allowed by Apple Music to basically use their app to wrap the interface around Apple Music, because everywhere else we have to use the Apple Music app and then use Chromecast or AirPlay into a device that's capable of such things. So the Bluesound NODE X, in fact, all of Bluesound nodes, they all do Apple AirPlay 2, but they don't do Chromecast. And that means if you're streaming from an iPhone, a MacBook or an iPad, it means that the stream travels through this device or through your iPhone, through your iPad on its way to the NODE X. So I agree that I think that's a bit of a weakness. I would love to see Apple Music integrated better into these systems, although I think the way that many manufacturers are now getting around it in terms of integrating Apple Music natively is to basically put a native version of Android on their streaming device with a touchscreen and then allow us to control it just as we would a phone, which is essentially what the FiiO R7 does. So where you can install the Apple Music app is really what I'm talking about here. God, I'm rambling. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, sticking with the Sonos theme, we've got a few comments here, so maybe I'll read them all at once. Homestead Rick writes, I replaced a Sonos port with a Node 2021. I ran them side by side for 2 weeks and the Node was just better. The port was somehow easier to listen to, but the Node was more involving. And then the next one comes from Dennis Meehan 8189. He writes, my experience with Bluesound and Sonos is that Bluesound streams almost instantaneously, while Sonos is fussy. Sonos seems to work better, easier with a turntable. That's true in terms of getting analog in and streaming it around the house, although the lag that I mentioned in my Sonos amp review, I know it can be dialed down inside the app, but there's still a tiny lag when you feed it an analog source and drop the needle. But the Sonos device does allow you to stream that analog input around the house. And then continuing with Dennis's comment, He also writes that Sonos has a more intuitive app and there's a much bigger market for used Sonos products in the US. And yeah, I don't doubt that. Well, not on both counts. Yes, there's definitely a bigger used market for Sonos because they sell more units. Whether Sonos has the more intuitive app, I don't know about that. I see a lot of people grumbling about apps and software, but I always liken them to banks, right? Everybody's got, or there are enough people out there that if you ask them, like, is this bank any good? There'll be a bunch of people that will jump into the conversation, tell you about their nightmare story. And then let's say the 97% of people who have never had any issue, they just don't say anything at all. So I've never had a single lag issue, software crash, glitch with BlueOS, but I'm not denying the people who have and have reported that on various forums and Facebook groups. But I'm just saying that if software is glitchy or unreliable in any way, it's generally, I guess in the case of BlueOS, not universal. It's not the same for everybody because a lot will depend upon the device that the app is installed upon, because let's not forget, BlueOS can run on Android and iOS, which is kind of typical of most streaming apps, but there's also apps for Windows and a MacBook, a macOS device. So I guess you just have to try it out for yourself to see whether it's reliable for you or not. And then the next Sonos related comment comes from Mr. Hewain, and he writes, I have to say I'm impressed with my Node X. I had to part with my beloved Qtist for various reasons and was expecting a big step down. Although it's clearly not on the same level, I was impressed with the detail retrieval and I'm simply enjoying listening to it. I'm new to the BlueOS and it's just a great user experience overall. See, like he has no grumbles about BlueOS, and he's saying that the reason I've teased this comment out is because, like me, he doesn't think it's as good in terms of analog output quality as a chord DAC, which I think is interesting. Okay, let's change tack for a minute. I've got a couple of comments here which are sort of related. Actually, I've got three of them, two from Patreon and one from YouTube. The first is a patron comment, comes from Mark, and he writes, apart from headphone listening, I'm curious about the new Node X paired with the GAN 1. That's the Peachtree amplifier that I featured a few videos back that needs a variable digital source fed over coax into it. So it's a power amplifier that takes only a coax digital input. So Mark is asking after the Node X because I used the 2021 Node and the 2i actually in Berlin as the variable digital preamp with that GAN 1, both in Germany and here. And he's asking about whether I've used the Node X with the GAN 1. And then Mark, also from Patreon, writes, nice work as always. Not sure if you are doing a Dear John or more thoughts on this one, or just able to share my thoughts. Did you see any difference in performance with the nodes when bypassing the internal DAC and using as a streamer transport only? So Mark kind of refines the other Mark's question. And then Christopher Bild. Yeah, Christopher Bild. Sorry, Christopher, butchered your name there. He writes more directly on YouTube. He writes, is there any difference using digital out into a DAC? And the answer is no. Like if you are just using the node, your existing node, like an N130 or a 2i digital out into your DAC, you don't need the Node X. It'll give you the same level of sound quality. I did do the comparison briefly. I didn't hear a difference. And even if there is one, because maybe my test was too short, the difference is going to be teeny tiny between these things. So really, if you're using a node for the GAN 1, then pretty much any node will do. Unless, of course, you want the benefit of the THX AAA headphone amplifier on the front. Okay, the next comment is sure to set this comment section alight for some people. But I'm going to read it, and I'm not going to pass comment on it. I'm just going to read it out and then we're going to move on, okay? Because I love this kind of comment, because this person, is it Les Arnold Finis 6775, is sharing his experiences. And I love comments like this because this is like giving back to the community in the comment section. And he writes, I have tested quite a few entry-level streamers with an external DAC, including the Node 2, Microrendo, Sotom SMS200, Project S2 and iFi ZenStream, and the Node on sound quality was the worst of the bunch. It did not sound any better than my MacBook computer as a source. This is a digital source, remember? And if you ask me, the Sotom and especially the iFi ZenStream, which is my current source, are great sources. So the Node 2 is a super convenient device, but it really sounds no good. I can see people pairing them with expensive DACs, and I feel for them because the source is almost as important as the DAC in my book. Of course, maybe the new Node X is very different and great sounding. No, it's not any different, but I don't think that, well, I wouldn't necessarily advise you, I said I wouldn't comment, didn't I? But I'm going to do it anyway, shit. I wouldn't necessarily advise anybody to use the Node as a digital source for like a 10,000 euro DAC, not unless it was just something to get you up and running. Now I know this opens the can of worms about digital sources not being just ones and zeros, which is why I didn't want to comment on it, but Les Arnold Fish 6775 has done all the commenting in that respect for me. I'm just saying that, yeah, in my experience, it's kind of similar to Les's, but these differences are small. And I think really for me, the advantage of the Bluesound Node is it's an all-in-one. It's a thing that you can plug in and get up and running with it, whether it's analog out or digital out, very, very quickly. And I don't think it's for people who, you know, really want to fuss over their DAC and then fuss over the quality of the digital signal that goes into that DAC. It's a much more of an everyman sort of starter solution, and probably the end solution for most people, especially because it's so easy to get this onto a Wi-Fi network. There isn't a lot of hassle. I would say it's pretty much as easy as a Sonos device to onboard onto a Wi-Fi network from out of the box. I think the BlueOS app, as I've said before, I know some people have had bad experiences, but I haven't. It's super easy to use. But then again, once I've used the BlueOS app to set up my device, I very rarely go back to it, unless of course I'm using a subwoofer output. So in the case of using the Node as a preamplifier, so then the sub output then becomes very useful and I want to play with the crossover. And then in that case, I'll also probably be using the HDMI input on the back as well, so I can use my TV's volume control to change the volume on the Node as a preamp going into a power amp. And that power amp can be digital or it can be analog. All right, sticking with the theme of digital connections, and I got a lot of comments about this, like, does the Node X also talk to external DACs over USB? The answer is yes. I'm sorry I didn't put that in my little spec sheet animation in one of the interludes. But S.H. Kerman Shahi, or is it Shkerman Shahi? It's really hard to read these usernames sometimes. But anyway, this person writes, Bluesound Node 2021 USB has cracks and pops with Roon, and so far they got away with it, and blame Roon. Please let us know if it works or not. Thanks. So I tested this morning. I set up the Node X, connected it via USB into the USB input on the back of a Cambridge Audio Evo 150 amplifier, which has a DAC inside, which has a USB input. And the BlueOS app told me instantaneously that that connection had been made, had been established. I clicked play on Roon and music came out of the Cambridge amp, so the connection was solid from the outset. And I hammered this Danny Howell's 2 CD set for like 2 hours. It's called Nocturnal Frequencies Volume 2. And not once did I experience a glitch from Roon. I even tried messing around with the volume slider to see if that would provoke it, and it didn't. So again, these, like, you know, when we have problems with a piece of technology, it isn't just because we have it doesn't mean that everybody else suffers it, right? So I couldn't repeat the cracks and pops issue that this commenter has. So to say that it's a universal problem, or to even imply that, you know, this is a universal problem between a Bluesound Node device using Roon and an external DAC, isn't the case. So you've got 3 factors in play here. You've got the Bluesound Node source, you've got the USB DAC, and you've got the Roon system managing the connection. Which one is it that's causing cracks and pops for this gentleman? I don't know. All right, let's change tack completely because I knew that many people were going to invoke the spirit of Wiim in the comment section, and they did. I've got a couple of them here. The first one comes from Stephen Howard 3358, and he writes, I'd love to have the Bluesound NODE X, but to be fair, I am enjoying the Wiim Mini and I can use the money elsewhere. Fair enough. And then Michael XZ1K writes, buy a Wiim Mini and enjoy and save $500. Okay, let's put my laptop down and pick up the Wiim Mini. So here we have a Wiim Mini. It's a tiny hockey puck device for $100. We've got play and pause and volume up and down on the front panel here. And then digital outputs are, well, basically Toslink really, that's about it. This is a great value device. It's fantastic value for $100. But I don't think we can pretend, I'll just reach over here for even the Node, what is this? This is the 2021 Node. I don't think we can pretend that these are somehow incomparable in terms of value, because this is a much more, I'll move it onto this side, this is a much more substantial bit of hardware, and it has far more features. For example, its analog outputs aren't 3.5mm, they're proper RCAs. We also have a subwoofer out, I've mentioned that before. We've got a HDMI eARC in, I've mentioned that before. We can connect over USB to our external DAC. You can't do that with a Wiim Mini. And then we've got optical in, so we can Toslink into this and use it as a DAC. But I think the biggest difference between these two is the quality of that DAC and the quality of what comes out in terms of analog outputs. Because, I mean, I've told you before that I'm not exactly crash hot on the sound of this. This is why I generally connect it to an external DAC. But this, the Wiim Mini, no thank you. I need to connect this to an external DAC. And there's no compromise on that. Now, I agree that if all you want to do is set up a network streamer, then spending $100 on this, and then let's say $400 or $500 on a Chord Mojo, that will get you a better sound than this running on its own. It will even get you a better sound than the Node X running on its own. But it's not just about sound quality, this game, is it? I think a lot of people buy these things because they want the whole package. They want the software suite. They want the connectivity on the back. But if you want to be reductionist about it, yeah, this plus an external DAC will get you better sound quality if you choose the right external DAC, like a Mojo or even like an RME, but that's €1,000. So that's a lot more expensive. But yeah, you can, with this, get a better sound into your hi-fi system than the Node X. But people like me who want to use this as a preamp, both digital into a GAN1 or analog into any sort of power amp, find this kind of functionality invaluable, especially with the subwoofer output. And also, let's not forget the touchscreen on the top here, I think is fantastic. All right, now we come to the what about section of this video. And the first one comes from Natan Bandler 7428. He writes, how would you compare the sound quality to the Eversolo? And then Vinod Kumar GX7WJ writes, how does new Node compare with the new Cambridge Audio MXN10? Now, I'm laughing because I just don't know what to do about comments like this. And I don't know whether, I mean, I'm assuming they are directed at me. If they're not, I'm sorry and forgive me for what I'm about to say. But I don't know what it is about my last video or recent videos that suggests to viewers that I'm in possession of an Eversolo streamer or a Cambridge streamer, because I'm not. I don't have them. I don't have access to them. I don't have a magic cupboard upstairs that kind of allows me to step into it, into an enormous warehouse like the hi-fi equivalent of Narnia, and just pull off any kind of device that I really need in this house. That's not how my job works. And to assume that any audio reviewer type person has access to all of the gear all of the time is flatly incorrect. And I need to disabuse you of that. And I'm sorry if you feel like I'm being blunt here, but I've got to sort of effectively, I'm not trying to stamp out curiosity. I'm just trying to make you understand that I don't have these things. Now, I'm about to review the FiiO R7. So I'm going to do that video next. In fact, I've pretty much scripted it, so it's almost ready to be filmed. But after that, I need to get back to doing speakers and amplifiers. Whew. Okay, let's move on. Bloody Hell 451 writes a long comment. I'll read out most of it, I think. I watch your reviews avidly, but there's just one thing. I have no idea what streaming is, how to go about it, nor do I know how much it would cost, excluding hardware, or whether the resolution would better my Meridian 508.24 or my Gyro deck. And then he goes on, I'll get to the end. Will someone please do a video for blokes who remember the ZX Spectrum 48K? I remember the ZX Spectrum 48K. Anyway, in the past, I have made videos about streaming for beginners. I've made several of these videos. So all you have to do, Bloody Hell 451, is go back a couple of years, look through the archive of videos. You'll find me talking about beginner's guides to streamers, to DACs, to servers, that kind of thing. So yeah, I've already done it, and that's probably all I'm ever going to do, unless I decide to redo one of those videos or revisit it with more modern componentry, which I might do maybe later this year, maybe, I don't know. I can never really tell. It depends if I have time, because as you can probably tell, I'm working to some fairly tight time constraints. But I appreciate your comment. I appreciate your frustration. I do see this, but there's not a lot I can really do, because as I said to somebody else in the comments yesterday who was thanking me for not assuming that everybody knows what a node is and does, in my reply I explained, yeah, and I do want to cover off that, but in doing so I have to take away somewhere else, because generally if I'm going to add something here, something has to come away here. So this is probably one of the reasons I missed off the USB output into an external DAC and talking about that, because I wanted to dedicate 2 or 3 minutes of my video to basically explaining what the hell a node is and what it does. Okay, we're getting towards the end now. So 2 comments that are related. One from YouTube, one from Patreon. Mr. Jimmy Jamesh from YouTube writes, surely a Powernode X would have been a better product to release. I don't know. I mean, I'm not Bluesound, so I can't possibly comment on what would have been a better product to release. I don't know how you can necessarily assert that, but I don't know whether you're asking a question or, you know, stating something as fact. But let's move on. Bruce Adamson writes, you are the man in the node. Get it, wordplay? Any signs of a Powernode X? Now, again, this comes up every so often in terms of like, John, do you know of a product coming from company X? And can you tell us about it? And my answer is always no. No, I can't. Now, there are 2 scenarios possibly in play here. The first one is that somebody asks me if a new product from this company is coming, and I don't know. I've got no idea. So obviously my answer to that person is going to be no, sorry, I can't talk about it, I don't know. But even if I do know, I'm still going to say, sorry, I don't know. Because if I talk about a product that hasn't formally been announced yet, that company is going to be super pissed off at me for leaking their product information. Because these companies, you would not believe, hi-fi companies that is, go to great lengths before releasing a new product to basically let their dealers and distributors know that it's coming so they can clear, I guess, existing stock of older models. But also they go to great lengths to make sure that those same distributors and dealers don't let the cat out of the bag. They don't spoil the party, because most manufacturers of a certain size generally want a ta-da moment, right? On a certain day at a certain time. And if I spoil that, those manufacturers are going to be pissed off at me. And they're probably never going to send me gear ever again. So generally, if a product has not been announced, you're asking either me or any other hi-fi reviewer for inside information is probably a futile task, because you're almost always going to be told, sorry, I don't know. Anyway, I hope this video covers off some of the questions that many of you had in the wake of the Node X video. I realized when I made that video, there were going to be a lot of good follow-up questions. So thank you for asking those good follow-up questions or making good follow-up statements or sharing your experiences. I really do appreciate it. And if you like this video, please consider giving us a like down below. If you like my attitude to comment engagement, then please consider subscribing to this channel. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching.